I had one of the most horrific experiences that I've ever had in my life. And it began with some parishioners from the church who actually got me involved in watching a young lady who a young man said was fooling around on her. From that point, a deacon and I pursued finding out was what he said true. The young lady and her boyfriend worked for the sheriff's department. And the young man that asked us to pursue it actually told her that we were pursuing it. The deacon called me. He said, she's over there, and just as he said, it's true. And so Sister Bam, one of the members of the church, pointed out to us that she had saw a young lady and two of them in my office. Says, listen, I didn't know what was going on, but I saw them rambling through your stuff, rambling through your drawers, and I seen them coming out of your closet, and I didn't know. They said you told them to look for something, and I didn't know.
I was in Pastor Cowart's office cleaning, and Shaquille Faison and Jamaica Jones entered into his office while I was cleaning. And they proceeded to look for something. They told me that he had sent them for something, and they were looking around. And I told them that, but they didn't. They said, it's not here. I can't find it. So I told them that, well, if it was here in the beginning, it must be there, because I hadn't moved anything except for to clean it, to dust it, and put it back. And they proceeded to keep looking. And so then, after a while, they left. They left the room, and I continued cleaning. And then I thought they had left the premises. Evidently, they hadn't, because when I had gone out in the hall next door to wash out some things in the washroom next door, they came back in, and they entered the office again, and at that time they left. So I really didn't see them take anything, because I wasn't in the office per se when they left.
I didn't know till days later this had actually happened. So immediately when I heard it, knowing the nature of what they had said, and immediately after I heard it, I called the police, had the police come down, and the police did a affidavit and went down and questioned them, and they admitted that they were in my office, even admitted to taking something out, told the police. So I was listed as the victim, put down as the victim, and police called Sister Bam and spoke with her, and she gave them the statement. Nobody ever arrested. Nobody. Afterwards, a young lady goes down and filed for stalking charges. A year later, 1 year later, I'm charged with stalking. Now, first of all, the elements of stalking, if you're charged with stalking, it means that somebody is aggressively behind you and they're trying to hurt you. You're not afraid of me if you come back a year later and file the charges. Secondarily, the mom sends me a text and asks me to go to the mailbox and get something out of the mailbox. The very day, her mailbox, put something in her mailbox, the very day that they filed charges against me for stalking. Now, the Winter Haven Police Department, they declined to do anything because they didn't see anything there. State attorney sent them back to the sheriff department a year later. Then they began to pursue me. The issue here is not the stalking charge. I would have went to court freely because I know what I did and didn't do. Was ready to defend myself. The problem came in the records. Hired an attorney. Told the attorney, I said, I want you to know that I didn't do this. I want to make this very clear, make this very plain. And I said that I can prove it. I can prove I wasn't stalking anyone. And I said, I can prove it because there's a document that shows that I was the first one that complained to the sheriff department that someone had broken into my office. I said, when you get the discovery, you'll find it. And for those that don't know what discovery is, we don't live in the Perry Mason days where, you hold back evidence and hold this back and you don't show. We live in the era now that if there's evidence, whether it's evidence to convict you or evidence to release you of conviction, the state law enforcement is required to give it. So, when I get all of the documentations from my attorney, there's no mention at all of someone breaking into my office and me filing a complaint. None at all. It starts with me stalking someone, allegedly stalking. And so I tell my attorney, I said, something's wrong. I said, let me tell you, I filled out a police report and I initiated this because my office was broken into. And of course, the day my office was broken into, I knew what was missing. What I had just worn, my underwear and jeans, and one of my robes was missing out of my office. You see, my problem was not being able to go defend myself. I could do that very clear. Had no problem with it because I know I was not guilty. But my problem was the information that was needed was not provided to my attorney. So I've got about 30 letters. I asked my attorney, please ask the attorney to give you the original report. There are two reports that came. An original report that I initiated when I told them that they had broken into my office. A supplemental report, which is the report that they came later and made complaints of stalking. Now, my attorney went, and I went over and over again. When I couldn't get it from my attorney, I personally went down to the sheriff department myself and says, listen, there was a report filed. I filed that report, and my attorney doesn't have the information that shows that my office was broken into, because you can't say somebody's stalking you and you're breaking their office. And you can't say that you're afraid of your life and you're breaking their office. So I go to the sheriff department. They acknowledge that there's a report there. They tell me you have to get it from your attorney. But it's public records. I should be able to get it in. He said, well, it's best you get it from your attorney because it wouldn't be redacted. It just means blotting out names if you get it from your attorney. At this point, I've asked my attorney so many times, I'm simply saying, listen, I want the report. I don't care if it comes out of heaven. I need it. I'm going to court. I want to be able, when I get to court, to show, listen, ma'am, this is not an issue about stalking. This is an issue about somebody breaking in my office. I initiated this first, and this person makes this claim to cover themselves. Okay? Give me the same benefit to have my document in court as when they have their document in court. Couldn't get the information from my attorney. Couldn't get the information from the local sheriff department. So this is a long period. I'm losing trust in this system, losing trust in this process. So I write to my attorney. I says, listen, I'm not guilty, but because of the way this system is working, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that something is going to go wrong and they're doing something illegal. I said, I'm going to take the least innocent plea of no contest. The judge offered me the opportunity to plead guilty and have adjudication withheld. I refused. I could have pled guilty, and on my documentation, the adjudication would have been withheld, but I wasn't guilty. So I pled no contest. And a lot of people don't know what no contest means. When you say no contest and you say guilty or not guilty, you have three options. You have guilty, you have no contest, and you have not guilty. Okay? I was facing, if you plead not guilty, then you're facing now a year. You can plead no contest or guilty and get probation. The fact of it is, I'm a preacher, and if I've already can't trust you with giving me some documents, I'm not going to trust you when I get in the courtroom because you're already doing things wrong. So I go down to the sheriff department about 3:22. I tell the sheriff department, I said, listen, I'm looking for these documentations and they're not there. My attorney said he don't have them. I couldn't call the state attorney because the state attorney was the attorney for the supposed alleged victim. So I get the captain at the sheriff department tells the detective, said, Cowart is looking for the documentation. He says something is missing. So he calls Kevin Loader, who works for the sheriff department, emails the state attorney's office and says, heads up. The defendant is looking for the documents and states that all documentation was not given to the sheriff's office. Okay? So I'm going a year asking for this document. State attorneys and sheriff department are communicating that I'm looking for this document while the case is going on, while it's being continued. So I plead. I plead on the 31st of May. I never was able to go to trial because the documentation that I needed was held back. Well, after I plead, I go dead at it. Because I understand now the case is over, I can go to work and I can find out what was really going on behind the scenes and why that document wasn't there. Would you believe what I had been looking for almost 2 years? Immediately after I plead, I go back to the same sheriff's office. They email the state attorneys. Heads up, Cowart went down to the sheriff department and state attorney's office saying the document is missing. And guess what? The sheriff department sends it over. The attorney says, for the state attorney's office, I reviewed the documents that you sent over. I still would have went after him anyway, in so many words. Now, the fact is this. It doesn't matter if that's how you feel. That's the way you feel. Fine. However, the law says that I should be able to have a fair trial, and all of that information should have already been provided to the state attorney's office. Couldn't get anybody to talk. I called the state attorney's office. I called the sheriff department's office. Sheriff department's blaming the state attorney. State attorney's bringing the sheriff department. So what do? I file a complaint. And they'd switched so many attorneys on the cases, it was completely chaos to find who handled the case, but I knew the last attorney that was on it. So I filed a complaint against every attorney that was on the case. When I filed a complaint, Michael Doolin responds and says to the Florida bar, the documentation that Mr. Cowart is talking about, I did not do anything further in this case because the sheriff department did not give me these documentation until after he had pleaded. So he admits that he did not get the documentation that I was looking for until after I had pleaded, which means they had the documentation, knew that documentation was important to the case, and did not release it until after I had pled. Now, it gets even worse. I pled on the 31st. Michael Doolin resigned on the 1st of June. and said he resigns because he doesn't no longer think that he can handle records efficiently with a computerized system. So you see, this is working within the legal system. Now, my issue that I'm talking about today is this hadn't just happened to me. This is the part of the law that most people don't see that happens. Most people don't see that's going on. Now, initially, when I filed the complaint, and the officer that came out to get my complaint for burglary was Dunn. He was a deputy Dunn. And I wondered what happened because I had filed with him for burglary and he never got back with me. Well, then when I got the documentation, I found out that a loader had taken over the case, and Mr. Loader was in fact friends with Mr. Maxwell. I found it out through documentation, and I made that complaint to the Sheriff's Department. Sheriff's Department responded and said they had no relationship. It said the only relationship they had was student to teacher at a class that was held. Well, I found out different. I found out in a deposition, of course, that they knew each other. Then I found out they worked together and that Maxwell and Human Resources had actually been responsible for transferring him on 3 or 4 occasions to different positions. So that was in fact an untruth that they didn't know each other and didn't have a working relationship with each other. I understood then the powers that be and what was working behind the scene. As I began to pursue more and search out for the truth and see what had actually happened, the major, was Major Hallman, who actually worked for the Sheriff Department at the time, sent me a text the very day that I went to get the records and making a fuss about these documentations that had actually shown my office was broken in two. He texts me and says the Lord told him that it's just the devil, and that's the devil and the people working against me, and he's a major, and that God told him to tell me, don't do anything, leave it alone, and don't say anything else about it. Well, I wasn't born that way. I believe if you do something wrong and something like that happens, you have to fight. And I fought and fought and fought until I started discovering the information. And of course, because of that, I began to be a target. And that's really what happens when you stand up against people when they're doing things wrong. When you stand up against a system, and this is one preacher against an entire system. I said, I've got to find out. I want an email that mentions, every email that mentions my name. I want to know what's going on. I made this request at the state attorney's office. I made this request at the sheriff's department. Upon making this request, I believe the sheriff and everyone else knew that there were some things that I was going to find because I had begun to complain. So when I went to ask for the records request, they're saying it's going to be $16,000. Can you imagine that? $16,000 for public records? They came up with all kind of excuses, so I decided to call a friend of mine. It's a white friend, Joel Chandler. I said, Joel, you know they want to charge me $16,000. Him and I both agreed there's something that they don't want you to see. He said, I've never heard of anything. It's ridiculous. And so we came up with the plan, and he said, I'll ask for the records. And he did. He called, asked for the same records that I requested, and they offered to give them to him at no cost at all.
He made a public records request to the sheriff's office asking for any emails that mentioned his name. Now, these are all public record. They're subject to disclosure. He has an absolute right to get access to them. And the sheriff's office is only authorized by statute to charge the actual cost of duplication. These are emails. He didn't ask for them a hard copy. He asked for them electronically, so there should have been no copying costs. And their response to him was that it was going to cost $16,000 for them to review these documents. And they asserted in writing that they were going to have to review every single individual email to look for any exempt information that might need to be redacted. He showed me their cost estimate, and I thought it completely implausible. And I've made many, many, many tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of public records requests. I've been involved in somewhere between 300 and 400 successful public records lawsuits over the years. So I have some experience with, I can kind of look at a public records situation and tell you whether or not it passes the smell test, and this one didn't pass the smell test. So as in an effort to try to help him get the records, but also in an effort to try to fathom the waters to figure out what was really going on, I made the exact same public records request. I asked for all the emails that mentioned his name. Now, he was told $16,000. I got them for free. So I ended up with the same exact records for free that they were trying to tell the black preacher he was going to have to pay $16,000 for. So that by itself raises some serious concerns. But once we got the emails, that's where the real concerns came in. It became very obvious that the reason that they didn't want him to have the emails was because of what was in them. And through the production of those emails, we found a number of things.
They wanted to spy on me and know things about me. I didn't know that the sheriff department had undercover agents in my meetings.
They would go to the pastor, or they would go to the elders in the church, and they would say, "Well, I've been mistreated by the sheriff's department. Can you help me?" When they themselves are sheriff's deputies.
I didn't know that one of the assistant state attorneys had suggested putting K9 dogs on me inside of a public meeting.
There had been a scheduled, nonviolent, peaceful, public civil rights assembly, or it wasn't any kind of a protest, it was just more of a civil rights rally that was planned between Pastor Cowart's church, PMJA, and Dream Defenders. And someone, an assistant state attorney, sent an email out to numerous law enforcement agencies in Polk County, and he suggested that that event would make a great opportunity for a canine exercise.
I began to put ads in the paper, information in the paper about stories that were similar to the stories that I had actually experienced. That became a problem.
Now, we were able to get these documents to the local newspaper. They ran this on the front page of the local newspaper, and the reaction of the community was a collective yawn.
First, the sheriff actually sent to me some of the local politicians, president of the NAACP, famous attorney, and about 10, 11 preachers. All of them were not, I guess I won't say all of them were what we would call Uncle Toms. But they came and they wanted to know what had transpired, and the attorney, I have to give it to him, he told them, he said, I want you to know that something happened, and in fact, there was an injustice did, and he spoke to them and told them that I should have been given the information that I needed when I went to court, and it was withheld. He said the sheriff and him had talked, and he wanted to come down and try to resolve the issue before it began to get really public, and that he wanted to help resolve it before someone ended up getting seriously hurt.
So I went to the sheriff personally, and I asked the sheriff, is there a way that we can resolve it? And the sheriff did it. So I went to Pastor Cowart, and I got from Pastor Cowart how he wanted to resolve it. True. Yeah, true. Unfortunately, we didn't have the meeting in mind regarding how to resolve it. I would say openly that he's attacked us, and that now he has to take a position. You see, and so right now that keeps some resolving of this without it having to be so public, and without somebody doing something to intentionally hurt somebody.
So the story that I'm telling, and the fact that this information that should have been produced in court was not produced, the fact that the sheriff the state attorney admits, the office admits that the documentations didn't come in until after I had plead, and the attorney, Larry Hardaway, who's admitted there was something wrong done in that process. They came, they acknowledged it, they knew it. They knew very well that it was an error. But the fact that an individual whose institution knows that they're wrong can call our black leaders and send our black leaders to other black ministers and ask them, in so many words, not to go public with it. And they knew, so they knew this issue.
Nobody cared. And in particular, white evangelicals don't care. So for example, in the church that I attend, it would not be uncommon on a Sunday morning to have someone get up and pray for Christian brothers and sisters who are being persecuted in Iraq or in Afghanistan or in North Korea or some other horrible place. But when it's published on the front page of the local newspaper that the white evangelical sheriff that they elected, and who keeps getting reelected with 99% of the vote, literally 99% of the vote, when he is sending deputies in to spy on and otherwise harass black evangelicals in their own county, white evangelicals couldn't care less.
Had I satisfied just my cause, then there would have been so many other issues out there that have not been resolved. The issue that I'm making, even in this documentary, there are people, if you went to court and the court says that you are not guilty, there's somebody going to believe you're guilty. It's going to be that. If you went and pled guilty, somebody's going to believe you're not guilty. If you plead no contest, people are going to have their own opinion anyway. That's not my argument. That's not my argument. That has never been my argument.
What's really fascinating to me as a civil rights activist and as somebody who's very involved with public records access, the way we found out about all this was accessing public records, which is just one small concrete example of why access to records is so incredibly important.
There was documentation that I found where they were plotting to have me arrested for making a complaint. They were trying to get me to say one statement on one document and one on another. Said, let's try to do that and try to get him arrested. Oh, it was ridiculous, the things that you find out simply because I'm complaining about an injustice that was done to me. And no one will take responsibility. Their private attorney wouldn't take responsibility for not filing and compelling the state to give a discovery. The sheriff department would not take responsibility and say that we didn't send the information that you requested and that when you asked for it as a public records, we should have given it to you. The state attorney's office, rather than take responsibility, Michael Doolin simply resigns his office. This is what happens in the system, and I think that if we'll really do a lot of research, a lot of our young people are facing the same thing. I was fortunate enough to be able to uncover what was going on. And because of that, it cost a price. I can show you many email conversations. I was involved in publishing these things that had happened in the community, in the papers. The sheriff department and the local newspaper are trying to control the information that I put out because they didn't want these injustices known in our community. Ministers, black ministers in the community who are asked to ask me to keep things from going public. Who do our young people have to defend them? You see, they have no good attorneys who will stand for them, because many of them are just taking their dollars, and many times in the public defender system, they're not for them. The state attorney's office is after them, and many of the sheriff's agencies and local agencies are after them. But then when you get the preachers of the community who ask you to silent down, and I've seen this on several occasions, several young people's cases where the state has been incorrect in some of the procedures that happen, where the police department and the sheriff department and local agencies have. So it was not something that was just isolated to me. I felt that it was just happening to me because it was me. But as I started doing research, I found that this was nothing new. This is something that has been going on all the time. It gave me an opportunity to see it, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. Now, one thing I can tell you, when you pick up your newspapers and you read your newspaper and you watch your television and you see your television and you hear these things, you cannot trust the law enforcement officers to tell you the truth, even in paperwork. But everyone believes the officers are true. Now today, as I stand, previously when I made these statements and I was talking to people, you know, people get the idea, oh, you're guilty. Everybody, we said, oh, you're guilty. I've said it, you said it. But now when you see things coming out and you see black men are being shot and killed all over America, and we're watching it on television, hands up. We're watching it. And the officers are walking out with no charges. If you believe that an officer can shoot you in open television and play it and go to court and walk out, it shouldn't be hard for you to believe that they'll do the same thing in a misdemeanor case. They'll do the same thing in a felony case. Shouldn't be unbelievable. And it shouldn't be unbelievable they'll walk. Don't you know if they can kill a man in the open space where everybody sees it and they walk out? Aren't you curious to know what's going on with the paperwork? That's where it really is. As blacks, and I've said it before, we see what happens on the street. We see the guy getting killed. It's wrong. But that's not the big issue. That's not the big issue. It's the prison. There are many who are in prison who have done absolutely nothing over a lie that an officer put on a paper. And everybody, when he goes to court, we must change our perception of law enforcement to think all of them are honest. And in the minds of a juror, if you have an officer testify and a civilian testify, that jury is going to believe that officer. The officers have put such a bad image of the black people that even when they testify, they're seen as criminals from the very time they testify. The officers can put anything on a paper and people will believe it. They can say anything and people can believe it. I experienced it myself. The only difference between me, I was able to document lies, document untruths. For example, I received a trespass warning to the local sheriff office. I'm a citizen. I pay taxes. How can I be trespassed on a public piece of property? They said I was trespassing and that I disrupted a meeting. However, I received a document of the officer that told them what actually occurred at the meeting. The officer never said I was disruptive. As a matter of fact, she said everybody in the meeting was agreeing with me. However, the sheriff department sent out information in my response to say that I was disruptive. And the document proves that the officer never told them that. As a matter of fact, she said everybody was cooperating with me. But the problem is, it's law enforcement. What is my motive in this? Is it my desire to convince you that I'm not guilty of stalking? I don't have to convince you. I know that within myself that I'm not guilty of stalking. My desire is to prove to you that there is a system out here that most of us know nothing about. You know, there's a secret aspect to criminalizing our young people that's done by paper. It's not done by iron, it's done by paper. Many young men have been killed without a gun. They've been killed by missing discovery. They've been killed by missing documents. They've been killed by police falsifying reports. You get 30 years, you get 40 years. How many people have life? You see, you're looking at the one man that died on the street, but look at the many that are dead in the prisons, that have been killed by the pencil, have been killed by the pen. The most dangerous weapon that a police has is not his gun, it's not his taser, it's his pen. Because every day they write lies down on documentation. And our young people on a daily basis are being convicted in this crooked system. If someone does not defend our youth honestly, if someone does not stand up honestly in this time that we're living in now, from the black preacher to the NAACP, the NAACP has become watered down. I experienced some of the things here in our own county. I don't say this as criticism. I say that our issue is not the 60s. They're still fighting the 60s fight. This is a new battle. This is a new fight. And our young people, you know, when Black Lives Matter came out and those things, Black Lives Matter is a response to many of our older establishments not standing up for that group, not dealing with that group that seems disenfranchised from the community. The pastor, the leader, they're against them. They all hold hands hand in hand with the local government, and yet our young people are being victimized by the system. But because of a few dinners and things such as that, they won't fight for our young people. Invite them over to a few NAAC banquets to speak and these kind of things there. And our young people are not being honestly dealt with. When leaders of these institutions can come to me and ask me not to make this public, when preachers and attorneys in our neighborhoods can do the same thing, our young people are in trouble. So I want you to know that many of you that are listening to me have grandchildren, you have sons, you have daughters, and you may be even a victim of this system yourself. You're not hearing it from someone that is a criminal or not a criminal. You're hearing it from someone who has experienced the system themselves. I provided to you documents, and the documents speak for themselves. I encourage you, my friend, to know the system is at work. As things begin to erupt like a volcano that has been still for hundreds of years, the exposure of law enforcement is beginning. It is beginning in the streets. It is beginning in the cities such as Ferguson, Charleston. It's beginning in Chicago, Tulsa, all over. Exposure's coming. A dead nigger is not good. Federal government, local government pays for people in prison. When you kill him, listen, you got chickens, you got hogs, you want them to live because they're going to produce. You're getting paid as long as he's giving eggs. Now there's one nigga that you kill him because he can't put no more eggs out. Now you see the chicken that we're going to fry, the nigga we're going to kill and fry, that's what I'm using. But they said we got 1 million in jail that's laying eggs. Don't kill the golden goose that's laying the egg. Keep that nigga alive. Kill him, arrest some more, and that's what's going on. This is more dangerous. And while America is diverting its attention to what's going on in the street, we must not forget what's going on in the courthouse. We must not forget what's going on at the computer. That's the reality of what's going on. And that's what my story is about, the reality.